My name is Matt Maynard. I live in the Andean foothills of Santiago, Chile, and I live in a small outlying town called Lobanachea down here in the valley, which has now been absorbed by the greater Santiago megatropolis.
The census completed this August 2017 showed that the city's population has just recently exceeded 7 million people. The historical centre of Santiago is constructed in the colonial grid pattern, and a limited number of colonial buildings still stand which survived the devastating effect of past earthquakes. Income equality across Chile is very high, with the highest GI-NI coefficient of 0.484 found here in Santiago. As you move away from the historical centre, this inequality is reflected in the poblaciones favela-type housing. This makeshift accommodation is found in the same neighbourhoods as the private residences of affluent workers who staff the offices of international banks and commerce in the illustrious Sanhattan business district. The climate has been changing dramatically here in central Chile. It is therefore best to talk about climate on a short time frame of the last 5 years. During this period, the average January midsummer temperature has been 29.5 degrees centigrade. The midwinter temperature during this period has been 11.5 degrees centigrade. The average annual temperature in 2016 was 16.7 degrees centigrade. El Niño is responsible for 60% of the rainfall in Chile, and the average rainfall of 350 millimeters per year can therefore vary on interannual timescales by 100 to 700 millimeters. June sees the most rain with 86 millimeters, whereas in summer months of December, January and February, we have in some recent years received no rain at all. Total average rainfall in central Chile is currently 350 millimeters per year. Since 2010, central Chile has been a period that is now referred to as the mega drought, with deficits in historical annual rainfall of between 25 to 45%. The Meteorological Office in Chile reported an exceptionally strong El Niño effect in 2015 to 2016, causing a warming of sea surface temperatures. These probably contributed to a raised air temperature, making 2016 the country's warmest year on record. This was reflected in the prevalence of the marea roja, or red tide, a poisoning of shellfish by algae blooms caused by warmer seas associated with El Niño. The algae blooms extend 800 miles along the Chilean coast from close to Patagonia in Chiloé to the northern latitude of Santiago. Since 1972, this has resulted in 23 deaths due to poisoning and left many fishing communities devastated by the loss of livelihoods.
En la capital van a llegar hasta los 37 grados.
Heat waves are increasingly common in central Chile, with a 40% increase in their prevalence in 3 of the last 6 years. In February 2017, central Chile experienced catastrophic forest fires caused by high summer temperatures and exacerbated by arson. At least 11 people died, and 70,000 hectares of planted forest were lost at an estimated cost to the timber industry of $350 million. Later in the same month, floods washed through the Cajón de Maipo Valley, leaving 1.5 million of the Santiago's inhabitants without water and causing mudslides which destroyed homes and roads. The previous drought caused surface runoff from the heavy rain to be higher than normal, which exacerbated the flooding. Despite the mega-drought, the majority of general circulation models in central Chile show little to no reduction in rainfall when set at a representative concentration pathway of 4.5. This graph shows mean rainfall in millimeters per day on the y-axis, plotted against data from in winter months of June, July and August 2006 to 2017 on the x-axis and modelled until 2040. The dotted black multi-model mean shows no decrease in rainfall. The difficulty in modelling in a long thin country where 6,000 metre mountains are only 50 kilometres from the Santiago megatropolis at an altitude of only 500 metres is not, however, overlooked by this Reading University study. And perhaps these inaccuracies that result go some way to explaining the anomaly between the mega-drought recently experienced here and the future rainfall as normal scenario that they predict. What is clear, however, is that there will be a general warming trend until 2040. This graph shows mean temperature on the y-axis, plotted against the winter months of June, July and August on the x-axis from August 2006 to 2017. The data has been modelled until 2040. The black dotted line represents the multi-model mean, which suggests a rise in mean temperature of around 0.7 degrees centigrade. So, what will this actually look like on the ground for central Chile? At the Chile and Climate Change Conference this October 4th in the capital, I heard Fernando Farias, Head of Climate Change at the Ministry of Environment, talk about how the fruit crops have already started moving south. Grapes that grew in Rancagua, he said, will soon be grown in Curicó. Apple trees that grew in Curicó will need to be replanted in Talca. This trend is expected to continue as the central Chile region becomes increasingly desertified and the south becomes steadily warmer. And these predictions of Fernando Farias are in line with the IPCC fifth report predictions about the reduced productivity here in central Chile of these fruit crops and also radiate pine timber. Recreational land, natural habitats and ecosystems are currently under pressure from construction in the remaining viable mountain slopes surrounding Santiago. The IPCC Fifth Assessment Report recognises central Chile as having great species diversity but also great habitat loss. The legitimacy of such construction, and in semi-arid and highly populated South American basins such as Santiago, is questioned by the IPCC Fifth Report. As temperatures continue to rise alongside population growth, it is not only plants and animals that are endangered, but humans themselves. How so? Because even if the precipitation remains relatively constant until 2040, as the mean values of the Reading GCM suggest, water availability for Santiago's growing population is under threat. Central Chile's cryosphere is melting due to rising temperature. Santiago relies on its surrounding glaciers as a water supply for the city's domestic, agricultural and hydroelectric needs, and this makes Santiago especially vulnerable to climate change. The IPCC predicts this with high confidence, adding that the city's economic inequality, manifested as inequality in access to water, amongst other indices, makes vulnerable groups particularly susceptible to the effects of climate change here in Santiago. To unpick this further, I headed down from the mountains to the heart of the city. So I'm here with Fabrice Lambert at the Universidad Católica.
What happens here in Chile is that the temperature are going to rise, and also there's going to be less precipitation as well. So they're melting faster and they're growing slower, so they're shrinking. The warming of the temperature, this is just due to greenhouse gas concentrations. This is a global problem. But another thing that affects glaciers is the local pollution, like particulate pollution, aerosols. This will be deposited on the surface of the glacier, which will darken the surface of the glacier, decrease the albedo, and which means it will absorb more energy of the sun, and the whole glacier will melt faster.
So that's the emission story, but how's that going to affect the hydrology of the area?
Well, if the temperature gets warmer, more precipitation in winter falls as rain and not as snow. So there is less snow that will be available in summer to melt, basically. On top of that, if the glaciers are melting, like while they are melting, because they lose mass, there is a lot of water available.
To interject here, those flash floods I mentioned earlier this year in 2017, well, the IPCC predicted those in 2014. And whilst those changes in the cryosphere that Fabrice talks about do cause low flows in the summer months, in the winter months, you get flash flood scenarios like this coming down here, and you can see how it's become washed out and the river is widened due to this much larger body of water moving down the Mapocho River than it's normally used to.
Once they have reached a small size, they're not going to contribute much anymore. So the big problem in the future in this area will be for a summertime freshwater source.
Great, Fabrice, thank you very much for being there.
Thank you.
So what about the socio-economic effects of Santiago's highlighted vulnerability to climate change? Less consistent and decreased water supply will affect Chile's hydro industry. 250 kilometres south from Santiago, British engineer Jonathan Benstead has recently completed his run-of-river hydro project in the Maule province, and the 6 megawatts of electricity it produces is enough for the 40,000 residents of nearby Maule. After visiting the project, he explained to me that the high levels at which snow is now falling and accumulating mean there is currently an excess of water runoff to power hydro projects during winter months, but that the long-term decline in snowpack and accelerated spring melt will eventually affect the productivity and viability of hydro projects in central Chile. The IPCC fifth report already reports a loss of 10% of Chile's hydropower generation capacity between the years of 2011 to 2014. More expensive and polluting energy will need to step in to meet demand. According to both the IPCC and Bensted, this gap is most likely to be filled by coal. In summary, a global move to reduce GHG emissions and decarbonise our global economies will have positive impacts in central Chile on marine life, reducing flooding incidents, decreasing the chances of forest fires, improving hydrology, restoring agriculture and its associated livelihoods, reducing pressure on energy demands, and reducing the incidence of skin cancer, of which the IPCC has already noted a rise in Chile. Locally in central Chile, a move to a decarbonised economy would have additional benefits for respiratory issues caused by the chronic air pollution, as well as helping maintain the glaciers with all the benefits to hydrology previously described.